Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast. A great guest with me today. I am excited to speak with Mike Perez from iLaywerMarketing. Mike, great to have you with me.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you for having me on.
Mike, we together have had a great experience, and I went back to my notebook here that lasted, man, from our very first contact, which was through LinkedIn, by the way, lasted almost 2 years, a year and 3/4, and ended in a very, very successful transaction that I'd like to share and talk about and debrief and unpack and all those kind of things. So thanks again for your willingness to do that. Maybe we could start number one. Can you give just a little bit of an intro to iLaywerMarketing so we get an idea of roughly how big it was and how long it took you to get to where it was? And iLaywerMarketing, I can conclude is in the legal space. Why'd you decide that over something else? If you can give us an intro, that'd be terrific.
Sure. Yeah. So iLaywerMarketing has been around for 17 years. So it's been a long time. This is not a overnight success by any means like that. This was a business that was built over many years. We've grown from, it started out with just me, for a couple of years, and then eventually I hired people on to the point where today we have over 60 employees, full-time.
What were you doing before this, Mike?
Before I started the company, I was working for FindLaw, a very large company in the legal space. They have a lot of businesses, but one of their businesses is focusing on law firm websites, law firm marketing, that kind of a thing. So they did a little bit of what we do today. It kind of started with what they were doing there. And so what happened is I was a successful sales rep there, ended up being number 2 in the country in my first year there. And there's hundreds of reps. And that sounds great, but the problem was I had a lot of pissed off clients. I was selling the services that they were, training me to sell on, and they just weren't delivering. So I had a lot of clients that were upset, angry. And so I started learning myself how to do website optimization. I had done some before in my past, and it was before then. It wasn't even really known as SEO. All right, SEO became a thing years after that. But I kind of first started dipping my toes in search engine optimization and website marketing in 1999. So it's been a while. But I started doing search engine optimization, getting my clients up in the rankings, helping their websites, to be found on Google. So after a certain point in time, I was realizing that I was much better than the company that I was working for, and I decided to go out on my own.
And that grew over 17 years, which means it wasn't a business for quite a while, but you had built some really cool software on it. You had a bunch of clients. Roughly, how big was the business when you did the transaction? The previous year, we had done about 16.5 million, maybe a little bit more in revenue. So, it was one of those things where because I specialized in legal, and that was my goal from the start, is to work with businesses that had good marketing budgets. Right, I didn't want to go and mess with people that had these $500 or $1,000 budgets for marketing. That's not really fun to do, and you just end up with a bunch of angry clients if you're doing that. So my goal from the very beginning was to work with businesses that had a good, healthy marketing budget. And I knew that the legal industry provided that. So initially my plan was to do legal, do medical and cosmetic dentistry, plastic surgery, those kind of things, target those businesses. But the legal vertical it kept us so busy that we never even really branched out into those other areas until this year we finally started out targeting the health vertical, but all this time it has been focused on legal. And your retention is well above industry average. So you have happy clients, which is a leading indicator for the business is growing nicely. All those things are working. Where in there did you start to think, maybe
I should sell the business, maybe I should partner, maybe I should take chips off the table. What was it that kind of started that thought process for you?
Well, the last few years, I just have had a lot of private equity reach out and just interest in the business as a whole. I wasn't really interested in selling. My goal originally was to not even consider selling until I got to $20 million in revenue. It's just a personal goal. But there were so many different companies that were kind of knocking on the door, and for most, I wasn't interested. But the company that I ended up doing a deal with, EverService, they had they had companies already that they owned in the legal vertical, and so it kind of made sense that it was a little bit more of a strategic rather than just a pure acquisition.
So to wind back just a touch, you got a lot of outreach, which I think many of our listeners probably do. So you get a lot of outreach. Was that kind of the initial hurdle rate before you would pursue with somebody reaching in, the fact that they were already in legal?
Right. I liked the fact that they were in legal and they already had a very successful company that they owned in this space, and one that we could really add as an add-on benefit to our clients, right? Some of the services that they were offering that they had, it just made a lot of sense to combine that.
And what were those services?
They do call intake. So they do for a lot of firms around the country, and I think they have other businesses as well, but they're, at least in the legal, they do answering service for law firms. So not all law firms are set up to answer phones 24/7 or to hand up certain call volume. So they handle that portion of the process for a lot of law firms, in addition to doing lead follow-up. So a lot of law firms, maybe they follow up with the lead and they try a couple times, they don't get a hold of them, and that's the end. Well, with the Alert Communications company, they will call and follow up and make multiple touches trying to get that lead, and that ends up mean more clients signed by the law firms themselves. So not only that, but then they have a live client chat service as well, which also helps with improving conversion rates on.
But they didn't have performance marketing in there. They had all those pieces around it, but not that.
Right. So they were kind of looking for somebody to handle that part of the business for them. And then they did a lot of due diligence themselves, obviously, and they ended up finding us after a ton of due diligence on their part, and realized that we were the best company out there in terms of SEO services in the legal industry.
And so what was the piece of it that you found most compelling? The part that you just plugged in really well, or the part that they did their research, the part that they were going to write a big check? What was it?
That was part of it. But the other, maybe more important than anything else to me, was that they weren't coming in to try to change our business as a whole, right? That's kind of the main fear that at least a lot of people that are potentially considering selling their company. Am I going to sell to somebody that's going to completely change everything for the business, right? And then that could lead to a lot of employee turnover, right? If the business changes, if the company culture changes, then you run the risk of losing a lot of valuable employees. So for me, that was important as well, that they weren't trying to change our business as a whole and ultimately cost us our key employees, which is important for us to continue having success.
Got it. So to kind of go through the chronology a little bit, as I remember it, you and I spoke, now I'm going back to the beginning of 22. We spoke, we connected on LinkedIn. We spoke a couple times in February. We wound up getting engaged, but you already had not signed, but you had an LOI from the guys at EverService.
Right.
And I know I can hear in my mind listeners saying, well, then why did you need to hire a banker? But you were pretty clear at the beginning that you didn't want to go through this thing on your own. What was your thinking around that?
Yeah, I mean, especially if this is somebody's first transaction, first time around, you shouldn't even consider this doing it on your own. There's too much work that needs to be done. And so I knew that this wasn't something that I wanted to do on my own, right? And I have other friends, successful business owners that have sold their businesses, and they said the same thing, right? Like, don't even consider doing this on your own. Yeah, you can save some, commission or whatever it is to pay to the banker, but in the end, that's not the smartest thing to do. And they were absolutely right. That's not something that you want to do on your own.
So let's follow up on two parts of it. The first one being the economics, because I went back and looked, right? So on your first deal was interesting. And so to level set, EverService, who's the buyer, is a very good group. And Parker was great to deal with, who's the CEO there. That is a company owned by Sunstone Partners out of California, which was like dealing with any private equity group. But these guys really wanted to have you. They worked hard. They were a good group, on and on from that standpoint. They came and made you what sure seemed like a pretty good offer. In that offer, you had about 77% was in cash. You had 16% in a 2-year holdback for rep and warrants. And then you had another 16% in a convertible note. That was kind of where they started from. Where we ended up, simply put, we're 10% higher in the deal value, and 95% was in cash and equity at close, with 0 in escrow because they agreed to get rep and warrant insurance, 0 convertible note, and you had protections around the equity value. So when I was doing the math, I think the value increase wound up being about 5 times what our fee was, just to give a little plug from that standpoint. The reason we got that done is because I knew 4 or 5 other really good buyers, private equity backed, strategic, and the rest. We talked to them and in fact got down to EverService and another group. That other group was higher by a decent amount. And yet you still wanted EverService and liked that fit. Do you remember what the motivating factors were? Because for a lot of guys, the extra $1 million or $2 million would have been enough to say, let's give these guys a try.
Yeah, for me, it was 2 things. Number one, I just really liked the people at EverService, right? Parker was just someone that I felt like I could have a good relationship with, moving forward. So that was number one for me. And then I met Jeff, who's the CEO, and he was great as well. So, people and who I'm going to be working with for the next few years, like that's very important to me. Number 2, I didn't build this company by myself. There's other key players here. And so I didn't want to do something that was only best for myself, which if I was only thinking about myself, I maybe would have taken that other deal. But I have a lot of employees that I care about and I wanted the right thing for them. And this was a better fit for our employees because that other group they were also great. I liked them, but this was a better fit for my employees and for making sure that our employees were going to be happy after the deal and making sure that we keep our employees post-deal.
And the other group of these final 2 was really in the early stage of just starting off. They had just acquired a platform company. They wanted you to be a part of that. And so that was probably going to be a 5 to 7 year journey before you get to the first exit, which would create a second bite for you. Whereas EverService is more fully formed. They're probably, 3 or 4 years into that thesis. So to get to the finish line would be a shorter period of time. And you have aspirations around developing more software and being out of people business and more in a software business. Can you talk about how that impacted your thinking?
Yeah, I didn't want to be required to stay for a long period of time. If I like where things are going, and I do so far in just the few, it's been about not even 2 full months yet, but I like what we're doing right now, and so that's part of it, right? I want to make sure that I'm like who I'm working with, that I'm not required to be for some very long period of time. So for me, that was an important factor. And remind me again what your question was. I got lost track of my thought there.
Yeah, no, it was just really around the time frame with EverService, that might allow you to get beyond this transaction and your second bite sooner so you can pursue the other things in business you think you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I still like what I'm doing right now, right? That was also one of the things. I didn't want to sell the business, and this impacted my time to sell. I didn't want to be where I hated the business and I just wanted to get out and then be forced to stay for a long period of time. I still like what I'm doing right now. And so that for me was another decision, or a factor in my decision to sell at this time, that I can still see myself doing this for a number of years and enjoy what I'm doing. Yes, my plan after this is to get into the software business, and we've created a lot of software here internally at the company. And for us, that's part of what helped us get a bigger deal size, right? Without the software, we're not going to be as worth what we ended up getting for our business. So software played a big part in the business as a whole, improving the business, making it successful, and then obviously making it more attractive, because it is one of the differentiators between us and other agencies, that we have this software that nobody else has.
So one of the things that I talk about, I'd like your perspective on this, is the guys at EverService wrote a big check. And whether a big check means 2 million or 25 million, whatever the dollar amount is, it's a big check, right? So they write a big check, and all buyers are very hesitant to destroy value that they just paid for. So the notion that they're going to come in and change things and alienate your salespeople and your employees doesn't make any logical sense. And I know that you know that and understand that. Was there things that they did along the way that made you more comfortable with that or less comfortable with that notion or idea beyond just the big check?
Just multiple conversations around that very specific topic, right? And some of the conversations were in depth, right? Because I wanted to know what things are going to change, because you can't come into a business, acquire a business, and then not make any changes. That also makes no sense. So the idea is, at least from their standpoint, is, do no damage, right? What can we change? How can we merge it with our existing organization without doing any damage, to the existing business? So yeah, those conversations were, there was multiple conversations on that topic. But that's what made me feel comfortable in the end going with them.
And then your job now, I use the finger quotes in the air, your job now is what? And how is that different from what you were doing 3 months ago?
Right now, it's not different. I'm still the CEO, and that's the position that they hired me, and with the expectation that I remained on as CEO. I'm now the executive vice president of the legal division of EverService. So the part of my job will be helping to merge the multiple brands and to be able to create packaged offerings for our clients. So that's probably the only thing that's really changed. I do have a lot more meetings right now than I've had ever before, but that makes sense because we're doing a lot of integrations and just the initial part of integrating the company and making sure that it's functioning as it should.
And so you now have an employment agreement, correct?
I do, yeah.
And so the employment agreement talks about everything, what your title is, but it also deals with what happens if you're terminated for cause, if you decide to quit, or all of those type of things. And that is a roller coaster like experience, because you have equity in EverService, right? You rolled forward a chunk of money. They need you to run the business. But damn, after we sign the check, man, if they decide they don't like something and let me go, that affects my ability to create software, my non-compete, all these other things. How did you think about that whole process? And what were the most important components of that to you?
I mean, that's something that I just let the lawyers deal with for the most part. There was so much, back and forth between our lawyers and their lawyers. But from my perspective, I just wanted to be protected, right? That it can't just be terminated for a reason just to kind of, to dump me and get rid of my share. So when you are doing this kind of thing, you need to make sure you have a great legal team behind you that that has been down this road multiple times and knows what to look for and knows how to protect you, because there's a lot of question marks when you go through a deal like this.
And let's call them out, because Jeremy and Tanya did a fantastic job from Buckhalter. Yep. They were really terrific. And let me get your thoughts on this, because the lawyer's job is to get a deal done to some degree, but their primary job is to protect Mike. And so their job is to look for potential problems and pitfalls and things where you're exposed, and then let you decide if you want to worry about that or not. What was that experience like going through? Because the lawyer's job is to say, here's how bad this thing could become if it extrapolates all the way out.
Right.
Whether that's remotely possible or likely. How did you process that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a good lawyer is going to consider all the possibilities, right? Even the most extreme situations that could potentially happen. And at that point, you're presented with all these things, right? When you do a deal like this, both sides, nobody's going to get all the things that they want. So you're going to have to, at some point, give in to certain things, right? And the other side, if you are, unless they're calling all the shots, then the other side's going to have some give as well. So for me, it was just a matter of my attorneys presenting me with all these situations, and then some where I'd have to say, okay, that's fine, I agree with you on this, and others where I said, you know what, I'm not worried about that, and even I know you're recommending against this, but I'm not worried about this, right? So
then there were others that were deal breakers.
What's that?
And then there were others that were deal breakers for you.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So I think if you are going to sell, it's important that you have certain things that you need to stand up for on your side, right? Because if private equity makes all the shots, then they're going to get a significantly favorable situation for them, and then you may be left out in the cold, right? In terms of, it depends. I really like this private equity group, and private equity is private equity, but I like all these guys, and I think that's important as well. And I talked to other companies that have gone through transactions with them, and they all had good things to say. So
yeah, and Sunstone, Gus, who run, and Jack and the team at Sunstone Partners are terrific to deal with. But if we can highlight one that I think is a good example, because a lot of times people will say, well, why don't you just address those things up front? So let's talk about software. So you've got a bunch of software. Let's just make it simple and say you got 5 or 6, 7 pieces of software that you use that run iLaywerMarketing, makes it successful delivering to clients, makes it super efficient internally, so your EBITDA margin is nice. And so Sunstone said, well, we want the software that runs the business. You said, of course. But you're a software guy and your brain works a certain way. And so you have stuff kind of simmering on the back stove that, as we finally got to that and part of the entire negotiation, which, by the way, is after quality of earnings and after due diligence and after all these things. So we're multiple weeks into the deal. And the buyer says, hey, so we want that software. Do you remember what that was like for you when we went through that?
Yeah, because the software side is important to me. And there were certain elements that from the start I said, this is stuff I'm keeping, and these are deal breakers for me, right? So for me, I was also not in a situation where I felt like I absolutely had to do a transaction, right? And we had multiple conversations where I told you, Todd, if this doesn't go how I want it, then I have no problem walking away. And then maybe, I revisit selling again in a year or 2 years or whatever it is. But I was in a good position where I wasn't in a position where I felt obligated to sell. So I think that was important. So for me, the software, we gave them multiple pieces of software in the transaction. Again, that's what helped the deal and moving forward. But not all the software was software that I wanted to give away, right? And so
let's be clear on it, because I think it's important. So again, there's 6 pieces of software that came with the business, and you said yes from the beginning. there's 4 other pieces here that have nothing to do with any of it. And you were clear on that, and they were fine that they didn't need that.
Right.
There was like 3 other pieces that you've been mulling over, working on, that are not relevant in the business today. And maybe they'll be relevant in the business in the future. And just to illustrate the granularity, our position was, hey, if this turns into something that really contributes to the business, we'll let you have it for $1 a year license fee. To which, if I remember correctly, they said, okay, that's fair. But between now and when Mike separates, we want to own the software. And that was, and that's how granular it gets. That was a deal breaker though for you. Can you talk about why and your thought process around it?
Well, if I'm going to do something after this and, say create my software company, I'm developing software, I wanted to retain ownership rights of that software, right? They kind of wanted to own it and I keep a license, but then it would complicate things too much moving forward, right? So for me, that was a deal breaker just because, again, it's what I plan to do next. I don't feel any urge or urgency to do that right now, but it is what I want to do, after I exit the business fully. So it was important for me to be able to keep that ownership of that software.
And the interesting thing is we communicated that with the lawyers. Those lawyers communicated with the buyer's lawyers.
Right.
The buyer's lawyers said, no, we get all the software. They said, no, we get, and so you see they're talking past each other. And then gradually this accumulates on a list of business issues that we have an all hands meeting for. I had a couple direct conversations with Gus, very specific about the software pieces, what you get, what you don't, and the question mark in the middle, and who owns that in between now and then. And at the end of the day, Gus, like a lot of good buyers, was very pragmatic about it and created a solution that worked well, right?
Right.
So now shifting gears a minute, I'd really like your comments. So we had Tanya and Jeremy that were great on the loft. And we also had Christian, who was fantastic. What's Christian's? So Christian was the accountant, your accountant, who did a ton of support for us and was great.
Right.
Remind me his name and the name of the firm?
Christian Emerson. They're with RKE.
Yeah, in California. And if you have an opportunity to use them, they're terrific.
They are.
Christian was great. But you have these, I'm going to call them pieces on the chessboard. You have me, who's your banker. You have your finance guy / accountant, and you have the lawyers. How did you work with those pieces? Who was mostly in charge? Who did you listen to for what? How did you work all that together in your head?
Each situation was different, right? There's going to be certain things where the lawyers are obviously the best people to take advice from. There's going to be other things where someone like you is the best person to take advice from because you've been down this road before. So I think each situation was different, but we also all worked together, collectively. And when there was any difficult decisions to be made, we kind of made them, talking together, right? With our legal team, with you. And then there was plenty of conversations I had with just me and my legal team, right? That were just outside of everything. So, at the end of the day, in a situation like this, you have to have the right people guiding you down this process. And for me, I had the right people in place. I had you helping me, and I had a phenomenal team with Buckhalter.
You absolutely did. Yeah, and with Christian.
When Christian was phenomenal as well. So, without those key players, maybe the deal doesn't happen, right? So it's important to have the right people behind you anytime you're going through a transaction like this or trying to go through a transaction.
Another piece of advice that would be helpful when you were going now, and let's call it 2 months post-transaction, all of those little pieces, those business issues I just referenced, do you remember any other than the software that we just discussed? Do you remember any of the other ones?
No.
Which is kind of my point of my question.
There's a lot of stuff that's going to go out through that process. And it's just, again, it's lawyers battling lawyers, right? And so there's a lot of that. And you kind of have to, at the end, have to cut through the noise and figure out what is truly going to impact your life moving forward post-transaction, right? So you just have to learn and figure out what is truly going to matter. And so I think we did, a good job of that, or as best as we possibly could.
I think you did a terrific job of it because it's hard. And I think that's the point, right? There's, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 12 business points, and they seem really, really important the closer you look at them, as opposed to pulling your head and looking at the big picture and the big story, right? And I just think it's really instructive that now, literally just 2 months later, all of those things have gone by the wayside in terms of not in terms of their importance, because if the shit ever hit the fan or something went wrong, and this is why lawyers do their job, they're going to use those documents to represent your best interest. So that's what they're looking towards. So you own 100% of the business. When did you tell your kind of most inner circle of employees?
I didn't tell anybody until I thought that there was a possibility that this could happen. Right.
Of closing the deal.
Yeah. Even that the deal was, because like I said, I had multiple conversations, right? I had multiple conversations with multiple companies. Some of that was with you and the companies that you had found. I've had other conversations outside of you with other companies that were interested. So I had a lot of conversations over the last couple of years, but for me, they were just conversations. And until it got serious and I said, okay, this is something where I think this could actually happen. Then I told kind of my inner circle to let them know.
And how many were in that circle, and how did you present it to them?
Initially, there was 3 in that inner circle. And the way I presented it to them was just being honest with them, telling them, here's the situation. Number one, I'm not in to do any kind of deal that is going to leave you guys or any of my other employees high and dry. I'm not trying to do a deal where, I'm out of the business and then you're no longer going to see me or anything like that. So I wanted them to make sure that I wasn't doing this deal just for myself, but this is something that I thought was important for the business as a whole, and could potentially be beneficial for them as well.
In hindsight, do you think you should have told them a little bit sooner or waited a little bit longer?
No, not my inner circle. No, it was, they were supportive the whole time. They understood and they got it. So, yeah.
And so how far into the deal, or how close to actual close, or maybe when did you know this was certain enough that you had to tell them?
You mean those close circle people?
Yes.
It was probably when I thought there was maybe 2 months left remaining, where I thought that, okay, there's still some hurdles to get over, but this looks like it could happen. So it wasn't until that point where I knew that there was still some stuff to overcome and to deal with, but I still thought that there was a very good chance of the transaction happening. So before then, I just didn't want to bother anybody and, concern anybody, because it does, at the end of the day, it is going to cause concern with a lot of people at the company, right? So that is the one thing. So I didn't want this getting out and people freaking out and then people looking and trying to leave the job.
And I know that's always the concern. It happens. I mean, again, we're 2 months post deal. Have you had any employee turnover to date?
No, none. Everybody was concerned at the beginning when we made the announcement. But since then, they've realized that there really are no changes that are happening to the business. Now there may be some changes down the line, with like health insurance and those kind of things. But other than that, there really has been no changes to anybody's day to day here.
And I know that Everservice and Sunstone, their desire is to have a bigger company that's more valuable, that in a service business will probably require more people, which will probably require that some people move up in the ranks.
Right.
Does your team see that? Do they believe that, buy into that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's absolutely one of the I guess selling points to our own employees, right? Is as we hire more bodies, as we get larger, we're going to need more people to be leaders in this company. There's going to be more potential for advancement and promotion. So that's absolutely a big selling point to any of our employees, because everybody wants to have that opportunity for advancement in their job.
And what grade would you give yourself on communicating the deal to your entire team? And can you describe how you did it?
Maybe I'd give myself a B.
Okay.
Not an A. I think these are always challenges. There's always questions, right? Of what is the appropriate time to tell people. And there was certain people, there was my inner circle, and then eventually it ended up being more. I had to tell people in HR and my accounting department, because they had to help me with a lot of the documentation that was required in the due diligence process. So yeah, I mean, and it was hard keeping even a lid on that, right? Because I didn't want, again, that getting out to everybody. So, I don't know if there ever is truly a perfect time, because people are always going to be concerned, right? There's always going to be question marks when you do something like this of, what is going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to the company? Are things changing? Those are always going to be the concerns that employees have. And so for me, I tried to shield them from that as long as I could, and then tell them at the appropriate time. And I can't remember the details. I think I was out of town when it officially became, an official deal. And so I wasn't in person, and I wanted to make the announcement in person. And I couldn't. So we had to kind of announce it via Slack, I think, because I wasn't here and I didn't have the opportunity to be here. So, so it's definitely wasn't an A grade, but got the job done, and we answered everybody's questions, and it worked out.
And have you done a town hall meeting or a Q&A meeting, or has EverService come to town and met everybody? Have you done that stuff?
EverService hasn't met everybody yet. No. So that's we haven't done that. But people talk here at the office. There's a lot of people that can tell us about what the vibe is like out there in our bullpen area and our company as a whole, and everybody, at least for now, their fears were put away, and they're not worried about it because they see that it's business as usual here.
Great. And then as we wrap up, and you look forward to the next year or so, I don't know if you can look accurately beyond that, but what are you most excited about right now with the company you have built?
For me, I've been the sole owner for the last 18 years, right? And so for a lot of the big decisions I've had to make on my own, I like the fact that I'm now working with people like Parker and Jeff, and I'm going to learn from them. And there's a great opportunity for us to make the business even more successful, add more products, and ultimately help our clients to perform better, because in the end, that's what's going to help us continue to grow. So I'm looking forward to just working with the guys at EverService and continuing to make the business better.
That's super interesting, because you've been doing it on your own for a long time, and if you're really going to communicate and work with other smart people, you're going to hear yeses and you're going to hear nos. And my question to you would be, the Mike Perez of 10 years ago, hearing no's from other smart people, would you have felt that to be restraints on what you need to do to be an entrepreneur, or have you always kind of appreciated that?
No, I mean, I think anybody, if you surround yourself with successful people, and everybody should have those people that they can rely on and look up to and learn from. For me, I've always had that in place, where I've had other successful business owners, other people that I can bounce ideas off of. And what better way is there to learn? Obviously, there's what you can learn on your own, but then there's going to be stuff that you don't know and yourself. So you kind of need to have those people that you can bounce ideas off from, that you can talk to, that you can get advice from, that you can learn from. So, maybe as I get older in life, I realize that, you don't know everything, right? No matter how long you've been doing it. I mean, I've been doing SEO for, nearly 20 years now. I don't know everything there is to know about SEO, right? Things change on an everyday basis. So I think people that are truly wise know that they don't know everything, and there's other people that you can learn from.
I think it's also interesting. You could learn a little bit more about SEO that you don't know, And I don't think it would change the value of your company at all. I think enhancing the value in the company is exposing yourself to these other services and areas that you probably know very little about and would need to rely on others from.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's why, someone like Jeff, who has been in multiple companies and helped them to expand and grow and eventually get acquired down the line, like you can't really replace that kind of experience, right? You can't get that unless you actually are out there. So the fact that I'm working with him and learning with other, seasoned pros that have been very successful at this, I feel like I'm in a great team of people right now.
I would agree. So my last question is this. For somebody listening that has built their business and has not done a transaction before and is at that stage where they're kind of thinking about it, what advice would you, other than, get a good banker, get a good lawyer, an accountant, what insight or advice or observation would you share as they enter into the process of doing this?
Get your books in order. Number one,
your financials.
Your financials. I mean, your financials. It's like an IRS audit on steroids, kind of a deal, right? They're going to be looking at everything constantly during the whole process of the due diligence period. So you better make sure you have your financials and your books are in order. And I know plenty of businesses where it's not in order, but at the end of the day, if your books are not in order, they can go through those books and end up lowering the value of your business because they find, hey, this wasn't done the right way, or this is a problem here. So, get that in order.
And just to quickly drill in on that doesn't mean that the fact that you were paying for season tickets or the company car or your brother-in-law is on the payroll. That's not what clean up your books means. That means make sure you're GAAP, make sure you're accrual based, make sure that you've got right deferred revenue accounts, all that kind of stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would?
They're going to want to know if your business can your business survive without you, right? Is it just you, right? Because if it's just you, that's less valuable. And
we need you, right? So we're going to have an agreement that says, you got to stay. You need to stay.
Right. But, for me, I think, building value in your business, you should have a team behind you. So it's not just you, right? Where if you stepped out of the business, can your business continue to thrive and operate? And, and for me, with my business, I know that it can because we have processes in place. We have a great team of people. It's not just me by myself. I have great, directors at this company, and there's multiple people that help make the business what it is. So I think that's also important that you have. And there's going to be some business where it's just, a person by themselves, software, whatever it is. But in other cases where it's a team of people, they're going to want to know if your business can survive if it's without you.
That's great observation and advice. Here's my my trophy. It's translucent, but it talks about or it represents iLawyer becoming a part of EverService. So that experience, Mike, was wonderful for me to share with you, and the highs and lows and the challenges and the good parts. At the end of the day, we got a really, really successful transaction done. And it was great to hear some of your insights and thoughts about that process. So thanks for taking the time to share that with me today.
You got it. Thank you for your help during the whole process, and glad to be part of your podcast here.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.